Okay. So like, yeah, little intense, a little extreme maybe, but for sure, dude, the value in high quality assistance work, it's super important. It builds resilience, it builds armor, okay? And I remember being told this some time ago. Someone said to me about my powerlifting career, they were like, Eric, your problem is you were a lot stronger than you looked. At some point, these things should even out a little bit.
Welcome back, Iron Road Podcast. First episode of 2026. It's going to be a great year. January, the fitness industry, where the clients instinctively flock like the salmon of Capistrano. Or at least that's the hope. Everybody is gassed up on new year, new me. And so far, business has been good, but plenty of people to help. Eric, you seem fired up today. How are you doing?
Dude, I need to make this as successful as possible so that I can offload all technological responsibility to someone who is more capable than me with more time.
Amen.
I don't even want to
talk about it.
I've been accused of having a negative mindset over the years, and sometimes that's true. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm telling myself, I'm just happy that I get to talk to Ian right now. That's a positive.
Means a lot, buddy. Same. Likewise.
Okay. That's what I'm doing, because I could be really pissed about the canceled podcast earlier in the week. I could be pissed about the last 50 minutes of stress towards my camera, but you know what? It's not relevant. It doesn't matter, because any day that I get to talk to Ian DiGiacomo, as far as I'm concerned, is a successful day. And so we're just going to go forward from there. Ian, it's not a coincidence that I say this. You are just the man that I wanted to talk to. Okay. I've had some moments of revelation this week. What they will mean for my future and or physical well-being remain to be seen. Okay. But as you're aware, I recruited a jiu-jitsu training partner of mine, this guy, Andrew. He's a former Army Ranger, jiu-jitsu purple belt, competes all the time, super fit dude. He's probably like 5'8", about $170, very lean, just your typical Army type guy, right?
Yeah.
And so we've been lifting 3 days a week. We've been going Monday, Wednesday, Friday, upper, lower, total. That's been our split. Okay.
Interesting.
We've been using some conjugate concurrent stuff. Like, we do explosive stuff first in every workout. We'll open with like a jump or a throw, and then some sort of speed version of a lift. So on Monday, we did, what did we do Monday? Plyo push-ups and then ballistic bench on the Smith machine. Yesterday, we did some broad jumps and some speed pulls, and then worked up to about 2 heavy sets of 5. And tomorrow we're going to do like dynamic effort, like more like rowing stuff, like explosive Penlay rows against bands off the floor. And, it's funny. I've been very open and honest with you about this, about how much, since I quit powerlifting, how I just haven't enjoyed lifting the way that I used to.
Yeah.
And, I've blamed a lot of different things for that, but now we've recruited a third guy. So now I've got 2 dudes under my wing, and we're all training together. And I got to say, having training partners makes it so much more fun. I mean,
sounds awesome.
The shit talking, that's so quintessential to who I am as a person. The desire to humiliate your friends at all costs, and then when you get humiliated, you act like it never happened. All right, these are all things that I'm used to. Like if you outbench me, I forget about it. It didn't happen. But if I out deadlift you, I'm never going to stop talking about it. I mean, this is how you have to operate in the world of masculine competitiveness. But it's been so much fun to have training partners, and I'm finally like back spinning wheels. Like, for this program, I didn't even want to think about it, and I used a program that was literally written by someone else. I'm like, let's just get in the gym, let's start training. And now the wheels are turning. And I told my partners, I'm like, all right, we're going to stick with this for a while, but we're probably going to go back to like a modified 3-day conjugate concurrent Westside style split, where we do like max effort upper on Wednesday, lower. I mean, max effort upper on Monday, lower on Wednesday, and then total body dynamic on Friday. And I'm just enjoying spinning the wheels and having some fun. It's been a really, really good time. And those of you that know me know that I'm not by nature a morning person. And so for me to be at the gym ready to lift at 5:15, it means that I wouldn't get that quality of training anywhere else. But the problem, Ian, this is what I wanted to talk to you about, is because you know I'm a psycho. Now I'm like getting so excited about lifting. I'm like, jiu-jitsu is kind of boring. Even though I've been doing it for 10 years, even though I'm better at jiu-jitsu, arguably, than I was as a lifter, it's just so fun to be back in the gym doing stuff. And I'm just trying to figure out how to balance this and also what lifts to incorporate. Like, do I go back to benching and squatting again? Do I focus on deadlift variations? There's so many things floating around in my brain, Ian.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I think if you eat your favorite food every single day, you will get sick of it. So
True.
jujitsu, you do all the time and for
Yeah,
years and years. So, maybe the luster has worn off. If you took a break for 3 months, I'm sure
of
that
course.
fire would come back and you'd love it again. So you might be just a little burnt out from the repetitive nature of jujitsu, even though you said every round is different and you're telling a story as are in combat. But you also have deep roots in lifting, dude.
Yeah, I
Like you
know.
have
I know.
really a long history and a lot of great experiences with lifting. So as much as jujitsu is your mainstay and your the sport on the forefront, I do think lifting is a close second. I mean, from our experiences alone, just from you and I and what we shared in lifting. So I would say ride the wave of this. First of all, the training crew. That is essential. I'm
Huge.
so jealous. I
Huge,
haven't been able
dude.
to
Oh
find
my
that.
God. It's just,
Everybody says they're about this life, and then when I invite them to train, they're not
nope.
about this life.
Yeah.
So I need some military guys to come in and at least hang, and not to keep up with the weights or the volume or any of it, but just some intensity. I need some intensity in training partners, and I just have not found that, unfortunately. People like us are hard to find. People who
Yeah.
are really
Yeah.
into lifting, ready to go. I wouldn't say at this point in our lives ready to sacrifice our bodies anymore, and that's what I'm conflicted with. So let me throw something back at you. I want to power lift again. I want to do something where I can really put a lot of effort into it. Couple of problems. I find that I get really tunnel visioned when I push my strength because I get so obsessed with it because it's been a passion of mine since I'm a kid, like since I'm 10. So the strength thing consumes my brain, and then I can't focus on my responsibilities, my work, my family. Everything else starts to diminish and fade. So I can't have that. But and I also don't want to sacrifice my body for like huge deadlifts and massive squats and bench. I'm thinking about getting into like other types of PRs, like axle double overhand deadlifts, so like, grip stuff. Like if you know who Mark Felix is, famous strongman, if his career is proof of anything, it's proof that your grip continues to get better as you get older. And that's
Oh,
something
for
you can kind of
sure.
hang on to.
For
So
sure.
like as you get to an old man, your nose and your ears keep growing. Your grip also has potential to continue to grow. Right. So I was thinking about doing stuff like that where I can set PRs for myself without having to like, all right, my best deadlift conventional was 600. To do that again, I'm going to have to risk my body a little bit. And I don't know if, as much as I want to get back into it, I think I would need a training crew to accomplish that, just for
Yes, you would.
the
Yes, you would.
being fired up, being
Yeah.
consistent, getting in the headspace. I don't know, man. Maybe I'll find a powerlifting gym around here, but that's more time, more
Well,
commute
let me say
time,
this.
and
I think for you, Ian, what you need more than anything, and it's been fun for me to play this role with my buddy Andrew, who's a very intense guy, and he'll train to the death if you let him, is I'm there to kind of be the mad scientist and get him, instead of having to barrel through the fence, to find the hole in the fence to get to the goal. And
okay.
I think, guys like me and you, we need someone to be like, cut it there. Don't go any
But
heavier.
yeah, but then you have to have somebody who's experienced to know, to
Yes.
understand
Yes.
that and say it out
Like,
loud.
give you an example, like this dude that I've been training with, it's so funny, Ian, from the world that we're in, that we came from, there are things that are like kind of unconscionable. But then you forget that, and in the sense of everyone in our old school powerlifting, or probably even current powerlifting world, is thinks about things and they would never ever have a weakness in this regard. But then you go into like guys that did a lot of casual bodybuilding and you see things that Louis Simmons was talking about as common 25, 30 years ago still being common. So my buddy Andrew, every time he starts to do a heavy deadlift, he tweaks his back. But guess what? He can't do, and he weighs 55, 60 pounds less than me. He can't do a single glute ham raise.
Really?
Right? Something that
So
was
it
like
could
a
be the
religion to
problem.
me. I did them 4 sets of 8 twice a week, strapping shit to myself. I mean, this was the thing that got my deadlift to go through the roof without having to hurt my back, because I was
Yeah.
able to find the assistance work to push. And so with him, I'm like, all right, we did 8 sets of 1 yesterday, speed pulls, and then I did 2 heavy-ish sets of 5 afterwards. And I was like, you're not doing the heavy sets of 5. Well, I'm doing these 2 pulls. You're going to do 3 sets of glute hams. Okay, because you're
Okay.
tweaking your back because you have weak hamstrings and glutes, and your body just going into it to your spinal erectors over and over and over again to finish this pull. So we have to reroute how this force is produced and figure things out. And you need guys like that to say good enough, right? It's good.
Yeah.
It's good enough, and
Yeah.
that's going to be a struggle for me as I continue down this road, is to know what's good enough. But as I look back on training systems that we used to use, obviously we trained with John Gaglione. John was big into, we'll say, Westside, or as other people would say, conjugate concurrent style of training. I think so many people got lost, Ian. I think this is going to help fix your problem in what Louis Simmons said, that they didn't pay enough attention to what Louis Simmons did. Okay. So what I mean by that is Westside Barbell is notorious, and this is a great way to kick this off because we're going to talk about Chuck Vogelpool today. So this is kind of setting and for our people that don't, I also come to realize that a lot of our listeners don't have a good base of knowledge of strength and conditioning, or at least not as good as I thought. So we can't just say Westside and assume these people know what Westside Barbell training is
Fair
like,
enough.
right?
Sure.
So Louis Simmons forever has advocated the concurrent training of 3 different methods. Okay, the repetition effort method, which is get a pump, grow muscle. The dynamic effort method, which is move submaximal weights with maximal force to maximize force production. And then the max effort method, which is basically lift heavy weights to recruit as many motor units as possible to get stronger and also get some hypertrophy benefits. So for Louis, the max effort method was defined as multiple sets at or above 90% of your 1 rep max, usually no more than 3 in any given workout. Okay. Now this system could obviously be moderated or modified. You guys, with my grapplers, I use this system. I have them do sets of 5. They're not doing singles. All right. So it's 2 sets at about a 5 rep max, like maybe take 1 set at 5 rep max, maybe take 10, 50% off, do another set. So for a novice lifter or someone who's less efficient, we don't want them doing 3 heavy singles with a deadlift. They may blow their back out. So they're going to do sets of 5. Okay. Regardless, these are the 3 methods. And instead of training them in a linear fashion, Louis advocated training all of them at the same time. And again, you might change the quantity or the total volume of each method based on your weaknesses or what your goals are. But his idea was we're never neglecting a basic function of the muscle because we're training it all year long, as opposed to like a hypertrophy block where we get big, but then we get weaker and slower, a speed block, and so on and so forth. What I say, though, about Westside Barbell, and to me, paying attention to what they do and not necessarily what they say, when you go and you watch these old videos or you hear about Chuck Vogelpool, and we'll get into this later in the show, and you think about what made these guys the lifters they were and why they had such long, successful careers, these guys were, first of all, they had the best training environment maybe ever. Right. So you
Yes.
could lift, you could put as many bands on the bar as you want. You can go as heavy as you think you can go, but like that competitiveness and that drive to get better changes everything. I remember reading a story in our research for this week that a lot of times what they would do, and this is a great idea. Let's say you have 4 guys doing rack pulls. They would do 2 teams of 2. Whichever team lifts the most pounds wins money.
That's cool.
And they would just throw money on the floor. And so it's like, let's say like it's me and you. I'm the better rack puller, whatever, just for argument's sake. And now I got to throw 25 pounds on the bar because homeboy just took his last attempt and we want to win the money. Like little things like that. But the other thing was these guys did a crazy amount of volume from assistance work.
Yeah.
And I think so many people look at the Westside method and they lose size and strength because they're just do my 3 sets at or above 90 and my 8 sets of 2 on my box squats or pause squats or speed pulls or whatever. And they lose sight of the fact that these guys were doing absolutely insane amounts of training volume on glute ham raises, reverse hypers, huge amounts of lat work, like 10 sets of 15 on lat pull downs, okay? Endless amounts of tricep extensions via band or those rolling dumbbell tricep extensions, okay?
Yeah.
Endless amounts of belt squats and all these other things. And that's really, I think, driving up those lifts is really what built them into being the resilient lifters that they were. Because at the end of the day, I don't know that, let's say you have a shitty bench lockout, okay? I don't know that just doing 3 heavy singles on something that trains at the lockout or above is necessarily going to build the tricep mass or the strength. But doing, say, 3 sets of 8 Spoto presses after you strain will. And I don't think that a lot of people have focused enough on the quality and type of assistance and supplemental work that these guys were able to focus on. And when you think about the training environment, if you were to reconnect with the training crew, you're never going to be able to pick a max effort lift that everybody needs. Guys might be hurt, okay? You have a crew of guys, you accept, I'm always going to get better with a crew of guys than I will be by myself. Meaning, not everyone can just go to their own rack and pick their own max effort work. Not everyone's going to, can't have one guy doing a box squat, one guy doing a good morning, you have to all get together as a team. But with the assistance work and the supplemental work, you can. And I think that was a huge difference maker, going back and watching Westside versus the World, kind of re-immersing myself in a lot of this stuff, thinking about what worked for me. Yeah, of course my deadlift went up when I did glute ham raises. It was a hypertrophy movement, okay? I trained them for sets of 8 to 12. They were not neurologically demanding, okay? And then you have your supplemental or max effort stuff like, yeah, good mornings, pushing them up did help my deadlift. Deficit deadlifts really helped my deadlift, but can't do them for that long.
No.
You're going to be fucking blown in half, you know? You're going to be blown in half.
Yeah, I think when the untrained eye, let's say, will hear about Louis Simmons and Westside methods, they'll scan over it in a half an hour online, and you see the tip of the iceberg, or you see the top of the pyramid. All the things that are responsible for their success is the rest, is what you don't see automatically, what you don't see immediately in like a quick internet scan. You'll see the max effort stuff. You'll see the box squats. You'll see the stuff that they do at their heaviest, which is the most impressive and maybe gets the most clicks and views. Nobody wants to watch somebody do 20 plus reps of hamstring hyperextensions.
Yes.
You know, like, nobody. That's not exciting. It's not sexy. It's not going to play in today's social media, moth attention span. But that's what actually matters. That's the difference. That maybe you don't want to watch it from like a 30-second mind rot, real situation, but people should, because that's what actually gets progress, whether it's strength, hypertrophy, all the assistance work. I think when I hit my biggest plateaus in powerlifting is when I skimped out on my assistance work. Either I had to go, or I just didn't want to do it. And how could that stupid move help me with this, 500 pounds, 700, whatever it was. You just, when you stop believing in assistance work, that's when it comes back to bite you.
Especially if you're a normal person. And I think one of the things that you and I have discussed is the need to emphasize that our viewers, simply by law of averages, are average people, okay? If you are a genetic freak and or you are perfectly built for an exercise, like a lot of the Russian lifters we spoke about a couple weeks ago, you could probably do squat, bench, deadlift and get really, really strong. The average person can't do that. And if I think about my last training for a meet, I was no longer in a crew. I had just opened my own business with my partner at the time, and I switched to like a squat, bench, deadlift style training. I had short-term, I had amazing results because I was practicing my technique all the time, in particular on my squat. But I started to lose some mass, and I burnt out pretty hard after that training cycle, as opposed to that conjugate concurrent split where you're always doing a ton of assistance work. And, dude, to really unpack this even more, one of the reasons why I think I always struggle with my bench, if I go back and think about my training, and you were there, okay, you saw how much lower body assistance work I did. I was obsessed with it. For whatever reason, I loved the pain. I was hamstring curls, good
You're
mornings,
good at
you
it.
know, yeah, I was good at it. I loved it. How often did you ever see me do a set of dumbbell bench?
I don't think ever.
Never.
You were big into kettlebell rows. That's
Yes.
what was
Yeah.
one of your staples.
But I did not do enough bottom end pec and shoulder work. Okay. And yeah, we were training with a lot of geared lifters. They were big into the high end stuff. So we would do board presses and stuff like that. But if I were to look back, we didn't even really have like an incline bench in there. Yeah, you could set it up in a rack, but like what I should have been doing was my max effort lift and then 3 sets of 8 to 12 on that incline bench every week.
Yeah. I also think unilateral strength is something that's really overlooked. Like people always do barbell, 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 but training your legs individually, like split squat variations, and then training dumbbells for upper body just to have autonomous strength for each arm. Like you need strength independently. Sometimes when you get into a barbell, yeah, you can lift more weight overall, but you don't know which side is dominating the lift if you're really overcompensating with dominant side. So having each side be strong and be able to stabilize dumbbells is also a challenge in itself. I think that the value is pretty tremendous there as far as strength carryover. And people don't, like you said, they just skip over the small stuff. But
On
the
the
small details
topic
make a big difference.
of unilateral stuff, there's a great story about Chuck Vogelpool where one of his training partners injured, I don't know if it was his pec or his shoulder. He had one arm that was not functioning. He's in a sling. And apparently he came in to help spot and low whatever he could. And Chuck was like, what are you doing? You got to train. And the guy was like, Chuck, my arm's in a fucking sling. And he's like, listen, I'll help you out. Let's do some dumbbell floor pressing. So Chuck Vogelpool takes a band and he ties the arm that's in a sling to the monolift so the guy can't move. And then puts a 100-pound dumbbell in the good hand and he's like, I'll be back when you've done 10 sets of 10. And just walked away and just left him there pressing with one dumbbell on the floor for God knows how long it took him to complete the 100 reps with one good arm. And then Chuck Vogelpool untied him and was like, all right, you can go about your business, sir. Okay. So like, yeah, little intense, little extreme maybe, but for sure, dude, the value in high quality assistance work, it's super important. It builds resilience, it builds armor. Okay. And I remember being told this some time ago. Someone said to me about my powerlifting career, they were like, Eric, your problem is you were a lot stronger than you looked. At some point, these things should even out a little bit. Like when I go back and look at that 710 deadlift that I posted recently, I don't even look that big. I almost look as big as I do now. Okay. But like I wasn't doing assistance work. All main lifts, all main lifts, all main lifts. And you're like, yeah, I probably would have benefited from a lot more quality hypertrophy work,
Yeah, I mean, but also we are our own worst critic. Whenever I look at old pictures of myself, I'm going to pick something apart I didn't like. I always liked being huskier and thicker, but it doesn't look good for online being, in a fitness coaching position. You have to be leaner typically. People value leanness over thickness because they can't always see the big, how you compare to other people and how big you actually are in person doesn't really translate online unless you're shirtless with and you're shredded. That comes through more on camera. But traditionally you've had thicker legs and you've had more slender, up arms at least.
Yeah.
I don't think you did much arm work, like to thicken up your arms over the course of time.
It's the other thing.
I think, like most people, we just gravitate towards what we're good at. And like when I mentioned, you were good at lower body assistance work. You were good at lower body everything. You were good at squats. You were good at deadlifts. So it just maybe attracted you to keep doing the lower body assistance work because you crushed it, you smashed it, and it felt good, and you felt stronger, and it fed, in a way, your ego with feeding your bigger lifts.
Dude.
And who wants to be discouraged under a bench press if you suck at it? It's like, I think my squat was probably my worst lift of the three, and it's not that I was shying away from it, but like I wasn't as excited to go under the bar,
of course not,
as I was to pull it off the floor or to press it off my chest.
Of course.
So, I forget who said this recently, but your weak points, the things you hate doing, are stopping you, right? Everything, whether it's in business, whether it's in fitness, the things you hate doing are what's holding you back. So if you don't do them, you're not going to make much progress. If you lean into it and you pull that Band-Aid off, you'll make a lot more progress.
I agree. I never liked training arms. I think another problem that I had was like, I always joke around, I'm the kind of guy that barely passes algebra, but then aces calculus. Like, the
Oh yeah,
harder something is, the better I will do at it for whatever reason. Like, I play to the level of the opponent. Like, if I was a football team, I'd barely beat the last place team, and then I would, or maybe even lose to them, and then either play with or blow out the best team in the league. And so, like, there was something so visceral about the pain from leg training and this endless desire to prove to myself that I wasn't a pussy. It was like, oh, go. And I just had to like push into it even more. You know what I mean? And, to be fair, uh, the other thing that was going on at that time, and this is stuff that I would change for lifters now, and I do this differently for my clients and even for myself. In retrospect, the era of lifting that we were in, especially me as a power lifter, it was the beginning of raw lifting, meaning that so much of what people had learned in training had come from the last generation of equipped lifters.
sure.
Okay. And so we were doing a lot of exercises that would have been great for equipped lifting, but we were also neglecting things that equipped lifters neglected. Like, we didn't do any overhead work. Okay, because in equipped lifting, you're wearing a fucking turbo slingshot, and it's going to be a tricep lockout predominantly for
Yeah,
for most people. That's going to be so. Did a lot of tricep work and
board presses.
neglected front delts and chest presses because that just wasn't considered what you had to do. People were taking the stuff that Louis Simmons had made gospel under the heyday of the WPO and the equipped lifting, and they were applying it to raw lifting. And if you look back, the guys that were doing the opposite, that were thinking about what they had to do for raw lifting, were the early guys that were the best ones. Guys like Dan Green, who was known for just like a lot of overhead pressing, a lot of like legs up, wide grip, flat benching, a lot of dumbbell benching and things like that. Like, that's what made Dan such a great all around raw lifter, where a lot of us were kind of stuck in the shadow of equipped lifting. And now I think if you look at what raw lifters do, if you study the best guys like John Hack or Colton, most of them are doing the overhead presses. They are doing the incline
Yeah,
presses. They've figured it out. So we were in this weird era, even technically, like, okay, you have to really bench wide, or you have to sit back into the squat. Like, these were considered gospel cues for all lifters, but without equipment, not always the best way to squat or bench. It still could be.
no,
Listen, there are some guys that can and should squat wide, but I wasn't one of them,
sure. Yeah,
you know?
I think your leverage plays a huge role in
For
that.
sure,
Like
dude.
how you're built, how your bone structure is built. Also, if you're like a novice or intermediate and you're coming up and you don't have guidance, who's there to tell you how you're
Yeah,
built and how you should be squatting or
for sure.
try this? Like I remember coaches telling me in the past, like, hey, take your bench grip out one finger length. And I was like, why didn't I think of that? After trying it, it's like, Jesus Christ, like that was incredible. Like now I feel so much more powerful. My shoulders feel better. Like one finger length. That's all it took. Because people will go like to the lines. They'll go from the knurling where it starts out to the line.
Yeah,
And that's their only two
yeah,
markers. But there's a lot of nuance in your hand placement, in your foot placement, and your setup that will translate to bigger, bigger pressing, pulling, squatting that people just they don't even try because they don't know any better. And I didn't know any better. So
yes,
unless someone's there to coach you and guide you, that's why like even as a coach like you, even as a coach, I think there's a lot of value in someone's behind you staring at you doing the lift. Like
yes,
that's why people pay trainers because someone's waiting for you and someone's watching you do it. So you can't punk out. You can't stop. Like you're there to do it. You have a time limit to train and someone is standing in it, making sure you do this lift. I think the accountability there, I think that's probably the most powerful thing we provide as coaches is accountability for
yes.
clients. And I think as coaches, we still need accountability from training partners or coaches, for that matter. I mean, you've hired coaches, I've hired coaches in the past. There's such value to it that it can't be overstated. The accountability, and again, having someone waiting for you at the gym at 5:15. How often would you hit the snooze button if you could?
Oh,
Like, would you
yeah,
just,
dude,
dude?
for
If you didn't
sure.
have your one or two friends waiting for you,
Yeah,
like, you'd be like, "Fuck that, I can't do it," unless I had maybe like you, people waiting for me at the gym that early. If I had to train that early or not train at all, I don't know if I'd do it. So,
yeah.
like,
It's
it's
very
hard to
tough.
admit as
No,
a coach and a passion,
it's very,
fitness
very tough,
enthusiast.
Ian.
Hard to admit.
Yeah. On the topic about benching, it's funny you say that. There's also a lot of things with the way the technique that you choose for any given lift that sometimes don't make any discernible sense, but they do work. So, like, you know, you'll see a guy, I always think about this, one of my favorite lifters of all time. We all probably should, on some level, gravitate towards lifters who are somewhat built like us with similar levers. So I loved Pete Rubish. Everyone used to call me Walmart Pete Rubish because we had the same
Yeah.
style of lifting, but he was just way better than
Yeah.
me. And I
Yeah.
loved KK, Konstantin Konstantinov's, rest in
Oh
peace.
yeah.
And Konstantin, he had a very hunched over style of squat, just like me, and was quote unquote only squatting in the mid sevens with no knee wraps, by the way. Okay. Of course, he pulled 939 with no belt and a full meet. Something I maintained is much like we said about Benny last week, is I think one of the greatest lifts of all time. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
there's no extra
Yeah.
points for not having a belt, but to do it,
Yeah.
no belt, full meat. And what I think had to have been like a 2100 or 2200 raw total, just totally insane.
Yes.
Little known factor, he benched in that meet something like either 585 or 600 with a close grip. And when you study his training, he said that for whatever reason, he was told initially go really wide to make the bar path shorter. And, you don't know like where your muscles insert on your body has profound effect on how much power you can produce. Okay. For whatever reason, he was much more powerful in a longer bar path. And so what did he do? He benched close grip. For a deadlifter of that caliber with those levers to bench around like what Stan Efferding did, who was a bodybuilder, who was a great bencher, really shows that, A, he probably put in a ton of hard work, but B,
Yes.
there's going to be a lot of experimentation required to figure out where your hands are supposed to be, where your feet are supposed to be on a squat, all of these things. And as your body changes, those levers will also change.
It's
Like
true.
I
It's
know
true.
when Donnie totaled 3000, I don't even think that he wore a suit in the deadlift because he was
Yeah.
so big that he couldn't get down to the freaking bar wearing a suit.
And
Okay.
as you know, the suits and deadlifts don't really translate so much. It's like sometimes a hindrance, especially if you're not training in the suit to get used to it. Like you said, they only wore the suits towards the end of the cycle or at the meet only. They wouldn't wear them in training that much. The suit it's kind of a weird thing with deadlifting. It doesn't give you that much. Getting down to the bar is a real pain in the ass. It screws up your start position. There's a lot of like caveats with the deadlift suit that doesn't give you nearly as much translation as a bench shirt or a squat suit. It's just because there's no rebound. There's no eccentric,
Yes,
right?
exactly,
So
exactly.
that's the problem. Is like with bench, you have all this tension building into the canvas suit at the bottom. Yeah, squatting same way. You have all that tension as your knees bend, as your hips flex, all that tension building up. Whereas the deadlift, once you're down at the bar and you get yourself into it, that's all the tension you got. So you get some help with the first like 6 to 10 inches of the lift, and then after that, it's really all you. So hopefully you generated enough force and enough speed off the floor to sail to the top. But you know, I don't know. I pulled in a deadlift suit in strongman contests at higher heights, 15 inches, 18 inches, not conventional barbell height, and that was uncomfortable. And I don't know how much translation it really gave me there. I don't know. I don't know if I believe in suits for deadlifting, but it was available, so I tried it. I
Yes,
used
of
it, right?
course, of course,
Any
of course.
tool available in my arsenal, I was gonna exhaust.
And
But
the reason why I bring up Donnie was I remember trying to pick his brain, and he was like, when I gained the weight that I had to gain to hit the big squat and bench, which in equipped lifting, remember, that's where you get the most out of the equipment, meaning you're going to spend most of your time training on those because those will be the bigger parts of your total,
yes,
right? But without question, his deadlift started to really suffer because he was so big, he couldn't get his shoulders behind the bar on the setup, right? And so basically, he was just forced to bend down and pick up whatever he had to pick up to get the total. And guess
yeah,
what? That obviously changes your technique. And when it changes your technique, it changes your assistance work. It changes what you have to do now to make the deadlift work. Now it's a massive lower back exercise, as opposed to maybe you would have gotten more hamstring or glute involved in it. But if your shoulders are 6 inches in front of the bar at your start position, it's basically a good morning with the weight in your hands in terms of
Yeah.
the levers. So as your body changes, okay, so too will your levers, so too will whatever you have to do to be able to improve at these lifts. It's never going to be, oh, this works forever for me. I mean, that's not true. There might be some things, but a lot of times the stuff you have to do in the beginning of any sport are not necessarily the things you have to do when you become more advanced, right? And so it'll be interesting. I had this kooky idea I was telling you to maybe come back and train for a big deadlift after I got my black belt, because I thought to myself, actually, I wanted to ask your opinion on this. There can't be very many people that have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and then 800-pound deadlift in competition. Okay.
I think if there was one, we'd know who that person was.
I told my
But
coach,
between
Jason Rao, this, and he was like, dude, what do you mean? There's got to be at least 50 people. And I was like,
name one.
I don't think you understand how hard it is to pull 800. And like, we've seen them too, like deadlift freaks or just freaks in general. But like most of those guys, like I've seen basically like Larry Wheels, like just pull up and just pull 700 like early in his career. But that means you got to work for the 800. And if you're doing jiu-jitsu, then you're probably not doing too much powerlifting to get to that point, okay? If anyone has done it, it would have to be someone who's like 300 pounds. Just a monster, just
Yeah,
like
that's fair.
a behemoth. And it was thinking about it, I'm like, man, like, how would I target my training? Just toying with the idea. I've already been putting the assistance exercises in place that I know work for my deadlift, but don't beat me up too much, right? So a lot of back extensions, glute ham raises, things that I could do and then go about my day. I'm not gonna start doing heavy deficit deadlift standing on a 100-pound plate like I used to, because I won't be able to move the next day.
Yeah.
I'll be completely shot. That's more of like a peaking thing than it is necessarily like a off-season building thing. But yeah, you start thinking about what do I need to do to build this up? And the topic of coaches, I spoke to our buddy Dom about this. I was like, hey, and our buddy Mike Powers. I still keep in touch with Mike,
I like Mike. Yeah.
and
Great guy.
they both had really good things to say about working with Josh Bryant. And I was like, all right, I'll keep that in mind down the road. And when I look at his training philosophy, a lot of the exercises and things that he suggests are very similar to things that I know work for me. So that's on the back of my mind. Maybe I'll hire Josh Bryant if I get a little more serious about this, because I knew what it took to get to 7, but to get to 8 is a different animal entirely.
Yes, it is. It is.
It's completely different.
Yeah, I mean, you're inspiring me, dude. I really want to get back into it. It's just like, I don't know if I can do it well. I mean, maybe you can you handle the mental energy required to get to that strength level without it just
Find out.
taking over your brain? Because maybe I just don't have the brain power to do everything that I need to do. Because I'm trying to push my career, obviously, push the
Of course.
business, spend time with my family and not
Yeah.
neglect them. Do you have that ability to compartmentalize? When you get to the gym, you are locked into that task. And then when you get out of the gym, you can just switch gears? Because I can't. When I get into this, it's all or nothing for me. And that's what I'm afraid of. So that's why, plus just getting hurt and then being sidelined for
I'll
any
tell you
reason.
what I think will happen, Ian. I think I absolutely do. Again, I haven't 100% committed to this idea yet. It's just something I'm
Sure.
toying around, but I know
Yeah.
I can absolutely compartmentalize it until the home stretch.
Okay.
Okay. I think I could go in and do my assistance work. I have no problem eating the food. I eat very clean. I have no problem getting the rest. I have no issue with that. Another advantage I have now versus back then is that I've got much better general physical preparedness. I no longer hate doing cardio, low intensity or otherwise. All that stuff is in place. But I'll tell you, if I got to a point where, let's say I hit 750 and I'm 50 pounds away from that goal, I do think it would probably take over.
Yeah.
I do think it would. I think, uh, I, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think I could get pretty far, but then I also think in my head, assuming of course it has no destructive components for my marriage, um, I could rationalize it by saying I'm trying to do something that almost no one has done. Okay.
Yeah.
And
And being an
also, like,
outlier.
kind of the way Donnie felt about totaling 3,000. Like, he pulled just whatever he had to pull that day to hit 3,000. He didn't want 3,005. He didn't want 3,010. He wanted 3,000.
A nice
Okay.
round number. Yeah.
I think I go into this knowing once I get 8, I'm retired. I'm not going to
From
stick
PRs
around.
and competitive lifting.
Yeah. I'm not going to stick around and try to pull 9, which would
No,
take
yeah.
insane sacrifice. And
Yeah.
at that point, you're getting injured. I think I could maybe get to 8 and not get injured. No one gets to 9 without getting injured,
No.
especially my size. Someone my size, not happening.
I have two questions for you before you embark on this journey. Are you willing to gain the body weight required? Because you're going to have to gain body weight, in my opinion, to get to that. And are you willing to do the drugs required? Because I think, you know your body best with the drugs. I've never done drugs, but I know the body weight helps a ton, especially in something like the deadlift. It's the massive driver of how much pounds you can pull. So, you may have to be between 250 and 270 to do this, believe it or not. So, whether unless the weight gain compromises your positioning. And then I've done that. I've gained so much weight where I got fatter, and now I can't get in the same positions I was in. My leverage suffers. I was still a horse, so I can still pull a lot of weight, but at some point the fatness does not help you. But I want to hear
I think I
your
could
take
do it
on it.
at about 245.
Okay.
Okay. But there's a caveat here. Okay. It's kind of a cop out. What I just said is kind of bullshit, and I'll explain why. Because if I do this, I'm just doing deadlift only. Okay. So that means I'm not driving up my pec and tricep size for my bench. Okay. I'm
See where you're
not
going.
I'm not training like doing a ton of quad volume for my squat.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just training for the deadlift. Okay.
So the muscles that are required there are taking all the size on.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And also the recovery as well.
Fair enough.
So now
Yeah.
if I were to say to you, hey, Ian, I'm going to come back and I'm going to total 2,000, different story.
Yeah.
Okay. Like I thought about it myself and I was like, what would a 2,000 total even look like for me? Like, how would I get there? And I think it would have to be like a 700 squat, a 450, 500 bench, and the rest of it would be deadlift. Knowing my body and like how I would be able to get there, which means
Sure.
I'd have to put on a ton of weight to bench
Yes.
that much again. I always felt like the body weight helps even more with the squat. Like that's just,
And the bench.
yeah, both of them. Exactly. So like, I think it could be done. Now to answer the second part of your question, we're talking about drugs. I'm not willing to take the drugs that I took last time. No,
Good.
no way. I can't
Good.
handle them emotionally. And my children and wife should not suffer from my instability. I
No.
would still have to take drugs. I would take different drugs. I would take lower doses of drugs, I think. Again, there's no telling what you'll do when you're in striking distance. There's no, when you are trying to push the ball over the goal line, knowing that you're going to walk away when it's over, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know what I would do.
Yeah.
There's no way. Okay.
If
But
it's your last hurrah, you might take some chances.
but for sure, no trend. For sure, no halo testing. I would avoid any hard androgens. I would probably stick with testosterone, Anavar, and maybe to push the ball over the goal line. If I'm not using Anavar, I'd probably take Anadrol, which was like one of my favorite powerlifting drugs, and it was always very good to me. Like I didn't make me crazy, made me really full, always gave me a really good strength boost. The last 4 to 6 weeks. And I think I told you the story. One of the most disappointing meet performances I ever had was when someone sold us fake Anadrol.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
We had like some left over from a previous meet cycle. And we started, you call them A-bombs. We started taking the A-bombs. If you could just hear Dom saying that, taking the A-bombs, bro. And like, we're getting all the results. We never take them for more than 4 weeks. Okay. So we're taking the A-bombs the first 2 weeks. And the last 2 weeks, all of a sudden I realized all of the glycogen and water that I had gained from the A-bombs, gone. And it happened to all of us. I'm not going to name everyone's names. Not trying to, if
Sure,
someone hasn't
sure.
admitted it publicly, I'm not going to put it
Out
out there.
people.
But
Yeah.
we ran out. The A-bombs failed us at the last second. It was very disappointing. But
Damn.
I'm not willing to take Tren. Certainly not willing to take halotestin. And if I were to use it, I would absolutely talk to a doctor about getting blood pressure medication.
Okay.
So something
Preemptively.
preemptively. There's not even a question in my mind. But
Okay.
it's all hypothetical. I'm just enjoying doing the assistance work, having a training partner, experimenting. It's been fun to have a guy who's serious in front of me and see him struggling with different things and being like, all right, well, you're going to do the speed pulse and then the glute hams. Okay, you're going to do this, and looking at each guy and being able to get out in front of it and put them over on something else. There's just right now. There's even, and I actually want your opinion on this too. Like, I don't know if I want to go back to benching again. And then I'm thinking, like, is it fake and gay if I make like my max effort exercise like a 3 to 5 rep max?
No, I mean, I would say, I mean, not gay. It's not gay. Is it as cool as a barbell bench press PR? No, but listen to the stage you're at in your life at this point, right? You can still measure strength through metrics on machines. You don't have to just be on the barbell only. So I wouldn't just measure your manhood on a bench press. It was never really your bag to begin. You did it because it was part of powerlifting, but it wasn't your favorite. And I would just say that unless you're going to try and go for a bench PR, just use the bench as an assistance tool, not so much as a PR seeker anymore. Does that make sense? Lost you, buddy. Lost power.
All right. The blackout is over. We have returned from the dark depths of prehistoric civilization to continue to give you guys the high quality training oriented content that you so rightfully deserve. Second blackout in inside of 14 hours, by the way.
That's no
Power
good.
went out last night.
Transformer got
I don't know, dude.
jimmied with.
I think it's the Chi-Coms. All right, they detonated EMP.
What does that mean?
Communist Chinese. Come on, dude. You got to get
Oh,
you got to get with your paranoid Alex Jones terminology. The Chi-Coms, folks. The Chi-Coms are using global genetic weaponry in conjunction with the global elite to depopulate the planet Earth and bring in a satanic cult. Anyway, the reason why
dude has some of the funniest clips imaginable.
he's the best. The reason why I asked you about the chest press thing was because I saw, and granted, obviously I'm not putting myself on this person's level, but I saw a badass clip of Brian Shaw doing a standing chest press with like 8 plates each side and getting himself like super jacked up for it. And I'm like, you know what? That's good enough for him. Me being a turbo minor leaguer in comparison to Brian Shaw.
Yeah.
Why can't I have some fun with like maybe even like a banded hammer strength chest press? You know what I mean? To really train that power and explosion. Why can't I have some fun with that?
Yeah, absolutely can. And he runs an event called The Strongest Man on Earth. That's Brian Shaw's hosted strongman event every year. I don't know if it's to compete with or just to add another event for strongman pros, along with the Arnold Classic and World's Strongest Man. But his is the Strongest Man on Earth, and he creates like the car leg press,
That's cool.
whatever, chest press. So I think he's one of the first to actually maybe in decades to introduce a chest pressing motion into strongman.
Really?
It's not typically part of the gamut. Yeah. So that's what you saw is I think he's getting all juiced up for that event in his contest, not just for training.
Huh. You know something, dude? That would have been great to see you compete in because you were always a good horizontal presser. And that would have been really, really cool. And it is, in my opinion, it's also like safer than a bench press. There's a little bit less stabilization. You get to just push. It's just you bracing yourself against something and pushing. I thought that was really cool. And I'm looking, I mean, he literally had like 8 plates aside. I'm not exaggerating. And he did like at least a triple with it. Okay. And what was most impressive was slow eccentric. Like he controlled it and like it was not like he's trying to spam it. It was unbelievable. Totally unbelievable.
Yeah, his training is dialed in, man. I mean, he's transitioning to arm wrestling
Uh-huh.
now, which is pretty cool. I guess in his older age, he's kind of like taking a back seat to strongman. He retired
Okay.
officially from strongman. But do you remember a quick story of my strongman history? Our training partner Anthony, the bench press
Yes, of
freak.
course. Of course.
All right. So he did a couple of strongman shows with me when I was just getting into it, just coming up, and he was just so heavily muscled and thick. He was just such a cool and just a nice guy, just really cool to train with and compete with. So we went to this show in Pennsylvania, and they had this unorthodox event for strongman. It was a log, like a log press, like the actual log, but it was an incline press. So you'd pick the log up from the floor, you'd sit on the incline press, and then you'd roll it
Okay.
into position, and you'd press like press commands and down commands like a conventional bench press contest. Well, the promoter of the contest saw Anthony, and after Anthony did the event, he goes, "I put this event in here for guys like you." So it was 275 at Anthony's weight class. He was 275, the weight of the log. So he picked it up, rolled into it, and dude, he got like 25 fucking reps. It was absurd. It was absurd. Where the next guy had like 12, 15, maybe 15, and it was like he didn't even start to slow down. It was just like a piston, like a machine for the first 20, and then he got a little grindy in the last 5. But there was just such a crazy strict feat of strength. He was such an impressive bench presser.
Unbeknownst to you, and unfortunately, I didn't do this enough because it would have actually helped my bench, and we kind of touched on this before. That was one of the only pressing variations that did not aggravate my bicep tendonitis when I was squatting with the straight bar. And I actually used
Which
it all the time.
the
Yeah,
log
I
incline?
used it all the time.
Really?
Whenever we were doing training
Huh?
cycles with the straight bar, I remember like I was really beat up, and Anthony was like, "Dude, just try this. I'm telling you, it's going to be sick." And lo and behold, I could do it without my bicep tendons getting. I don't know if it was because the neutral grip, the
Yeah.
decreased range of motion, the incline, probably a combination of all the variables. And that was like how I tried to keep muscle mass on my pressing muscles when my bicep tendons were flared up, because it just worked. It just worked. Like, yeah,
It's
it
comfortable. It
honestly
was comfy.
was a really cool exercise. Just great. So yeah, I mean, obviously I probably couldn't even do 275 for like 3 in that position. Yeah, I was a terrible presser. He was
Yeah. Yeah.
especially when you consider how he had like negative explosive power. Like, he wasn't one of
0.
those lifters
Yeah.
that's so
Yeah.
explosive that they're not as strong as you think they are. Everything he did was pure brute grinding strength. Just
Yes.
unbelievable. Like,
Unreal.
he was
Unreal.
when we did like dynamic effort work, that was like the only time in the squat that I could like really bury him, because even I had more speed than him. You put bands on the
Sure.
bar, it's over for him. He
Yeah.
can't accelerate. It's just like the same, it's just like the same speed the whole way up.
You
Yeah, it
can't
was just the same
accelerate.
speed. He couldn't possibly accelerate it. And so I would usually get the
Yeah.
better of him on like any type of banded or chained squatting variation, because he just like was so slow that he just couldn't do it.
One
Yeah.
pace.
So on the
Yeah.
topic of all this, I want to, because this has been a somewhat snake bitten show, and I want to make sure we get to I want to hear your opinion on a couple things. Did our research this week. Okay. Our physique of the week is none other than the great Chuck Vogelpool. Okay. So Chuck Vogelpool is one of the guys, along with Matt Dimmel, who put Westside Barbell on the map as a lifter. Okay. Matt Dimmel and Chuck were the two big guys that started to set world records when Louis Simmons was first training people out of his garage. Then he owned a commercial gym. Then he went to another Westside location. Now, when he passed away, I believe Westside was in the location that it's currently in now. So Chuck is a real specimen and a fascinating person. And when I look at Chuck's lifts, and I say this with a ton of respect, obviously Chuck had good genetics and was a talented lifter, but I think he's a perfect example of taking maybe below average genetics for an elite lifter and bringing them to the absolute maximum in terms of what can possibly be accomplished. So, just like a cursory
Interesting.
little bit of research here, and it's tough to, when you research Chuck's best total, in a way, it's actually not his most impressive meet. Okay, because he got his neck broken in the gym while wrestling with Matt Dimmel. So Matt Dimmel was like a 330-pound absolute fucking maniac who later died of a drug overdose. Okay, I think he got hooked on heroin and it was ball game over for him. But when Chuck got his neck broken, he went from benching like in the fives raw to barely being able to bench. And this was unfortunately before he even hit the prime of his strength career. Okay. So there's a
Wow.
lot of meets where maybe like his total's a little bit better because maybe he figured out how to get more out of the bench shirt, but he was known primarily as a squat specialist. He was the first guy, I believe, at 220 to squat over 1,000. He also did it at 242 and
Right.
275. His best
Okay.
total in the multiply division was a 994 squat, a 501.5 bench, and an 805 deadlift. He did squat over 1,000 at 220. I'm imagining it simply wasn't at that meet. His deadlift might have suffered, or his bench maybe just wasn't there. He was known for going in for the squat and pull. And as we discussed before, puts you at a huge disadvantage in equipped lifting because you get the most out of so many more pounds from the shirt. That big
Yeah.
totals in equipped lifting are from squats and benches, unfortunately. Now, I know some guys are snickering, well, he was a multiply lifter. Couple things I want to stress here. This is back in the era, when the guys actually squatted below parallel. Okay, there are numerous videos of Chuck taking a G or more below parallel and absolutely crushing the weight. Second of all, this was literally before guys knew how to get anything out of the equipment. Dave Tate famously said that he couldn't figure out how to get more than 50 pounds out of a bench shirt until well after he retired. Here's a guy that benched 700 in a full meet. Okay. These guys wouldn't even train with belts. They literally did all their training was done beltless, and then they would put on a full suit at a meet and just guess what the numbers were going to be. Like real cowboy, like reckless shit. Chuck was known to be one of the most intense lifters of all time. Was more of someone, and I mean this as a compliment, not as a compliment, but just not as an insult, I should say. Definitely left his best stuff in the gym. All of the guys that train with Chuck say that the most impressive feats of strength they ever saw were just workouts where he refused to lose. Okay, famously, when Vlad Alhazov, who is one of the greatest squatters of all time, he's from New York. He went and trained at Westside Barbell. When he was training with Chuck, there's a famous story that Matt Wenning tells that it's Matt Wenning, someone else, I forget who, Chuck Vogelpool, and Vlad Alhazov. Keep in mind, Vlad is like 300 something pounds. He's a huge man. And Vlad had a 1250 squat in gear, sunk below parallel, took it deep, and then later got out of the gear and broke the all-time knee wrap record. Okay, so Vlad was an incredible specimen, especially as a squatter. I've spoken about this before, but there was some workout that they did where they had something like 700 plus pounds of band tension on the bar. Okay, that's before you even put a plate on. Before anything, there's 700 pounds pulling you down faster than the speed of gravity. And this is going to kind of bridge into the stuff with Chuck's training that I want to talk about. They were doing speed work, and then they decide they're going to work up a little heavy after the speed work. It turns into a shootout between Vlad, who is 300 something pounds, and Chuck, who at the time was probably competing at 242. Now, to be fair, he's probably cutting weight to make 242, but nevertheless, he's competing to make 242. And they just keep throwing on plates and plates and plates. And according to Matt Wenning, Chuck keeps standing up with the weight like it's a fucking empty bar over and over and over again. Finally, they get to a point. Vlad tries the weight 3 times and misses every single time. Now, guys, if you think pulling 600 pounds off someone's back is bad, imagine pulling 600 pounds that is being pulled down. That is, and then on top of that with the additional bar weight. So we're talking for Vlad to miss this weight and keep coming back. He too is a crazy person because this is beyond dangerous. Like the bar could easily remove your head. I mean, easily. Okay. Chuck outsquats.
Stakes are high.
Chuck outsquats Vlad Alhazov in the gym, but then goes to the meet and bombs. And Vlad and Vlad sets a world record.
Blew his load in the gym.
And Vlad sets a world record. I believe that was the meet that he squatted a legit 1250 at it was either 308 or super heavyweight. Chuck was notoriously intense. He loved to train. He would do all sorts of just crazy amounts of assistance work. He'd be at the gym an hour before the guys were beginning their max effort work, just doing lat pull downs and tricep work. He just had all this maniacal energy and wanted to train. And I found this interview from like '04. It was Jim Wendler, famously he trained at Westside and then famously wrote 531, which has been one of the most successful training programs in the history of the internet. And this is when they're both training at Westside, and Jim is interviewing Chuck. And Chuck is a very soft-spoken person. At the time, it was impossible to even get an interview with Chuck. He was very just in his own world, very shy person. Now he's done a number of different podcasts with either Dave Tate or the Westside Barbell guys talking about his time at Westside or training. And I believe since Louis has passed away, I think Chuck, I could be wrong about this, but before Louis passed away, Chuck had mended fences with Louis, and I believe he plays a strong role in the training of power lifters at Westside again, now that he's retired from the sport.
Nice.
Okay. But anyway, they asked him about his training split, and I thought this was really interesting. He said for 15 years, he did a traditional max effort, dynamic effort split, traditional Westside conjugate split, max effort, upper, max effort, lower, a couple days off, a dynamic effort, lower, dynamic effort, upper, and whatever. But he noticed that he would just always work up heavy after the speed days. And that as he got stronger and stronger, it was taking a huge toll on his body. Okay. Keep in mind, he's got a broken neck that's surgically fused at this point. He's got a cage in his back. Okay. And he used to have to tape his ribs up so they would not pop out while squatting over 1,000. Okay. So we're talking about a guy that really wants it. Okay. This is no joke. Okay. And he said, and I think this would be a good thing to internalize for people like me or you that want to get back into training heavy but don't want to kill ourselves. What do you think he removed from his training, Ian?
I'd say weekly max effort.
Correct. Stop doing max effort.
I'd say he spread his max effort out over a month.
He didn't even do max effort. So what he realized was he loved to work up heavy after the speed work. So he would do an upper body repetition effort day, a lower body repetition effort day. Okay. And then do speed work for both days and work up heavy after the speed work. Okay. So he greatly increased. This is so funny. We were talking before about, the stronger you get, the less you want to do assistance work, the more excuses you make because that set of squats was so much more demanding than it was when you were squatting 315. Well, here's a guy that went the opposite direction, did more assistance work and still worked up heavy, but he did it after the speed work. So he's fatigued at this point. Okay. So he's not as fresh. Okay. And then he would typically work up like stupid heavy on a squat after the speed stuff, and then do some sort of deadlift variation. On the days when he did not work up after the squat, he would pull like a heavy rack pull or something afterwards, just to make sure he felt the strain of something heavy to kind of help his confidence. And when you were talking about, hey, Eric, do you think you could keep it under control if you go back to lifting really, really heavy again? It made me think, like, as long as you're still building muscle, okay, you're moving weights with intent and feeling something heavy, you're still building a bigger and bigger foundation. And when the time comes that you have to peak, I think the strength will be there. Now, of course, the caveat here is he was still straining. It wasn't like he hadn't strained for 6 months and he's going to go into a meet cycle. Like, he still felt the pressure of the weights. He still had the skill of straining. He was still overloading whatever the weak points of his body would have been in any given lift. Let's say it's his upper back that's weak. He's overloading it with rack pulls, you know what I mean, to try to make sure that he's keeping everything together for a deadlift. But when I think about when I trained like conjugate style, there were times when we worked up probably a little too heavy after the speed squats. And a lot of times this was after, we had gone pretty much full retard, because we always trained Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday was generally our training split. And most gyms, they recommend you do like your max effort, upper or lower, whatever day you're doing first. take a day off, and then you go to max effort, whatever the opposite of whatever you did. Because of all of our work schedules, we always did Monday, Tuesday. And I always felt like that also hurt my bench because we were coming into the gym after, 2 or 3 days off, Saturday, Sunday, and we go full retard on Mondays. Like all of that energy is there. And then on Tuesdays, we're like barely like sleepwalking through our bench press,
Yeah, I think it's the biggest problem is people have a hard time gauging and taking the gas pedal, going off the gas pedal with proximity to their threshold, right? So it's really a matter of if 500 pounds is your absolute limit, like knowing that and not feeding your ego enough to hit that often enough is really, it's hard to do. It's hard to back off, and it's hard to call it without good training partners. So kind of circle back to our point from earlier, it's really hard to pump the brakes when you're feeling good, when you're moving more weight, when you're busting through PRs. Like, good luck pumping the brakes on that, especially if you're on drugs or if you got other guys hyping you up who aren't looking out for your best interests, which Westside, it seems like your best interests weren't really the priority.
No.
It was more win the bet, make you lift more weight. But yeah, I think if you can stay well within your threshold, I think you'll be able to recover and bounce back and perform well the next day and the next day.
I agree. And also, it was a kind of an interesting, just an aside, I also realized how much heavy deadlifts killed my bench because I just couldn't generate any lat tension the next day. It just so much of that isometric squeezing on a deadlift to go into benching the next day, and you're just like, oh shit, like whatever. But point is with Chuck, he's 5'7", so we're not talking about a huge guy. He's built to squat. He squatted very wide. Okay, probably as wide as you could go and still being able to break parallel. Okay, so he was not a narrow stance squatter, never was, even when he trained raw in the gym, always squatted super wide. Gained a ton of good mass over the years. I mean, you think about 5'7", started competing at 181 or 198, and by the end of his career, he was at 275.
I have a picture of him. Let me pull a picture up real quick, just so we have to do it justice of his physique of the week. Check him out. So, the thick guy, man. Thick guy. And very well proportioned.
That's the key. I'm glad you brought that up. For a guy that's 5'7", he had the right levers for a big deadlift.
Yeah.
Can you pull that picture up again, Ian?
Let me see. I'm trying to minimize it here, yeah. Check that out.
So, this is, unfortunately, Chuck was so averse to publicity. There's no shirtless selfies of Chuck on the internet. The best pics of his physique are like screen caps of VHS tapes. I think there's a famous video of him outside Westside Barbell with no shirt on, walking Louis Simmons's giant pit bull. It's like the most menacing thing that you will ever see. Like the dog is like pure muscle. I think he had 2 pit bulls. The logo on the Westside Barbell thing was a drawing of his pit bull named Nitro. Okay. And I think it's him walking Nitro. But here's Chuck. He's either competing in the 242 and cutting or 275. Chuck pulled similar weights at both sumo and conventional. Okay. I believe he pulled 816 conventional at 220. Okay. So he was consistently in the low 8s. This is, of course, being done in a full meet. Towards the end of his career, he squatted, I want to say 1175 at one of his last meets. And again, a legit squat.
Jesus.
But one of the things that I really liked about Chuck is, again, we're going to be as honest and open and fair as we can get here. Equipped lifting can be annoying, but I don't have an issue with equipped lifters who admit that it's annoying. Okay. And in this interview with Chuck, Jim Wendler asked him, what do you think about the state of multiply lifting? And he said, I think it's ridiculous, but this is the only sport I have. So I have to wear the shit.
He's too deep.
Yeah, he's like, this is it. He's like, I'm
back out now.
At the time, again, there was no raw lifting. So from his perspective, it's like, okay, well, guess what? This is the sport. And if I want to win, I have to just wear all the shit that everyone else is wearing. Okay. but he did very impressive numbers even outside of a canvas suit. So most world records, with the exception, I think, of Brian Carroll's squat, are done in canvas suits, and he might have later gone to a canvas suit. Canvas suit just has way more stopping power, okay? But there's also, like, I don't know the exact material. We'll call it like a poly material. That's the company that it was called Metal. They used to make their own squat suits, metal squat suits. Chuck did a lot of really impressive lifts in metal squat suits. In fact, the thing we just showed, he's wearing a metal suit for sumo deadlifts. Now, that is not nearly, again, from my limited understanding, as hardcore as a canvas suit. Now, later in his career, when he squatted his 1160, he was wearing a canvas suit. Okay, so I mean, he did what he had to do, like no question about it. But the dude's drive and work ethic were unparalleled. And whenever we look at like a physique of the week, I think there's got to be something that we could like learn from. Like, what could you internalize from someone's training that you could incorporate right now? And I think it would be very easy, like we said, talking about Louis Simmons before, it would be very easy to say, okay, like, this is what they say. Okay. But let's look at what they do. Like with Chuck, it's training with a lot of intensity, which, also probably kind of hurt him, but let's be honest, he trained with a lot of intensity. But here's a guy who loved to train. You don't go into the gym and do that much assistance work if you don't love doing it. No one, that's
Yeah.
you have to love to train. So it's intensity, it's love for the game, and it's doing the work. And I don't just mean the bare minimum. Like, I remember telling you this story, having a conversation with Donnie Thompson, asking him why super heavyweights look like shit and always get injured. And I was so new to powerlifting, and like we said before, whenever you are surrounded by people, you tend to think that the whole world is like your friends. And sometimes it's a harsh
Yeah.
realization when you realize they're not. So you could say a lot about you or me or the people that we trained with, but you can't say that we didn't train hard. Okay,
No.
you can't say it. Like, I'll take that to the grave. There's a couple people in the room, maybe, but that was about it. Almost all of us always said it. Um, and so in my mind, everyone trains hard. So I asked Donnie, why do these super heavyweights always get injured? And he's just like looked at me like I was an idiot. He's like, Eric, they don't train hard. And I couldn't believe that you would be able to squat over 1,000, suit or not training hard. It
Yeah.
just,
It's hard is
yeah.
relative.
But like, Donnie was right. And Chuck was able to have a multi-decade powerlifting career at the top of the game because he loved doing it and because he put the work in. He did the volume of work required to be able to do what he had to do. Now, he's never
Yeah.
spoken publicly about drug use. Obviously, he was on drugs. There's no way you're not training at Westside Barbell and being clean. That's not a thing. In fact, Louis would, I mean this seriously. He'd probably throw you out for not taking drugs. Let's make that
So
very clear.
he said something to that effect. I forget, it was Bigger, Stronger, Faster, one of my favorite documentaries, where he was like, you're not going to be as strong as possible without the
Yes.
drugs. So you can be as strong as you can be, but if you want to be as strong as possible and you want to be a world record holder, you need to take the drugs. And that's like basically not verbatim, but paraphrasing his line from an interview in Bigger, Stronger, Faster. Great documentary,
And
by the way. If you haven't seen it, check
it's
it out.
amazing. Probably in retrospect did more harm than good, but it was still a good documentary.
Yeah? Why?
I think a lot of guys took they took what they wanted to hear from it, and they were like, "Oh, steroids aren't that bad. Just beam
Well,
me up, Scotty." And
they did the good and the bad, the
yes,
perspectives. That was
yes.
the whole.
But it was, considering where the culture was with it at the time, it was an excellent job at trying to bring the discourse on anabolic steroid use back to neutral. It's important to
Okay.
remember that documentary is coming out like at the peak of or directly in the wake of the baseball steroid scandal, right? So like
Sure.
everyone's thinking that you're just gonna like get cancer and die the second you inject yourself with testosterone, which of course was simply not the case, right? But again, we don't know what Chuck was taking. We know that everyone in Westside Barbell was on gear. Whatever, who cares? It simply is what it is. And I'm not saying that you
Part of the
could
game.
possibly tolerate the volume of what Chuck did if you were natural. You couldn't. Although a lot of guys who were on steroids couldn't do it either. The guy obviously was in shape his whole life and loved doing what he was doing. But
Yes.
you have to have a love for it. You have to want to do it. Uh, or at the very least, there has to be serious discipline, but there has to be a love that gets you into it. Like, there's no question about that. Okay? And you need to do the repetition effort work. And like I said, one critique I'd have of myself back in the day was I just did not do enough repetition effort work, in particular for my upper body. I just didn't do it. Ian called me out. Hey, you were bad at it. Maybe you didn't want to do it. Probably true. Okay. Because in retrospect, I did a lot of rows. It was just pressing.
You did a lot of rows.
I did a
Yeah.
lot of rows.
A lot of rows.
So like, can't deny that, right? But I think that's the lesson that you take from Chuck. And then also you look at with someone, the mistakes they made. Don't leave it all in the gym.
Yeah. If you're going to
Yes.
compete, if you're going to take that path and compete, on a platform in a contest where you have to peak for that event, well, if you're going to go through all that trouble to perform your best when it matters, like we used to say, a lift doesn't count unless it's on the platform, meaning in a meet, in a contest. Like, oh, I did 3 something in the gym. Well, no one cares. It's got to be on the platform. It's got to be recorded and in an official capacity. That was like our mantra back then. Doesn't count unless it's in a meet. So if you're going to go through all the trouble, prepare for a powerlifting meet, go through all that pain and anguish, you might as well be your best on contest day.
And Louis Simmons has stated
Yes.
that if Chuck went into a competition fresh, he believes that Chuck could have squatted 1,300 at either 220 or 242.
Wonder why he didn't realize that, or nobody could talk him into training with less intensity and less work and, to peak better. Like, for example, Hafthor, right? His peaking is incredible. Who knows what he's capable of, truly, but he knows how to peak, and he knows he's a patient lifter. I don't think there's much intensity going on there. If you watch his training videos, it's just like getting the work done. Like, I love the theory and the concept of being that intense and coming to the gym and just sparking and spitting. It's a cool thing to conceptualize, but many of the best lifters today don't do that. It's just super methodical, and you come in, you check the boxes, and you perform on contest day at your absolute best, or at least your best chance of. Your essential nervous system's not shot. You're not, taking all this energy out in lifts that don't count.
It makes you wonder if you look at the longer a sport has been around, the more wisdom and knowledge there is around it, right? Powerlifting is a much younger sport than Olympic weightlifting. And it makes you wonder if Olympic weightlifting is the way that it is, with a lot more of a measured approach and less intensity, because it's actually the better way to train. Because they figured it out earlier, right? Because there's just more history and more time around it. Now, I could think of some counterpoints to that, like Olympic lifting, there's no eccentric component really to the lift, so people tend to do a lot more volume at higher intensities in Olympic lifting than you would in powerlifting. Like, the eccentric aspect of it is very, very challenging. There's so much coordination involved in Olympic lifting that in some respects the lifts are not as demanding on like basic muscular function, because there's so much technique. It's not just pure brute strength, just muscling your way through, which is what powerlifting ultimately is. So there are some fundamental differences there. Powerlifting, you really can't lift every day like that. You're not going to see a powerlifter do multiple sessions a day. Maybe they'll drag a sled or walk on a treadmill, but they're not getting back under a bar after squatting a heavy triple.
No.
It's not a thing. It's not going to happen. But it does make you wonder if that calm mentality is the better way to do it. I mean, I would hate to admit that it is, because I love acting like a hooligan. And that's one of the things that always drew me to powerlifting, was just like the intensity. Like, when you had a decision of what to get into, and you see videos of Olympic lifters, and then you see videos of Westside Barbell, the guys getting fucking nuts in the gym. I'm like, I want to go Westside Barbell. I don't want to be sitting around there. But according to everyone that was around, Chuck would not back down from a challenge. He hated to lose so much, even on like a daily basis, that like he was willing to just die in the gym. Like, 2 funny anecdotes about Chuck, and then I guess we can wrap this up. One is, there's a hilarious video when he was like either towards the end of his career, he's thinking about making a comeback, where he squats like 1,300 in the gym with reverse green bands. Okay. And he gets under it, and one of his training partners yells at him, "Chuck, they're breaking in your house and they're trying to steal all your shit." and he's like, ah, and he just and he just crushes the weight. But which is such a I've thought about that line maybe once a week ever since I saw it. It's like 12 years ago. So crazy. But also there's a story just to give you an idea of how Chuck trained. So for those of you who haven't done a dynamic effort squat workout, you're usually going to do 8 to 12, maybe as high as 15 sets of 2. You rest about a minute between sets or less, depending on the size of your training crew, okay? And you're typically putting max explosiveness into every single rep. Chuck, being in great shape, was always he was basically the king of speed work. He was explosive and he had great work capacity. Apparently there was an incident where he was coming back from an injury and him and Dave Tate are doing the speed work. It's like them and Louis Simmons. And Louis just gets his work done and taps out. And Dave says, just thinking to himself, you know what? Chuck is injured. Maybe I can finally beat him in the speed squat by doing more weight than him. Okay. And so the two of them just start going back and forth. And he's saying, like, what he's doing to fuck with Chuck is as Chuck is racking the weight, he's already putting his hands on the bar to set up for his set, and just so they're just doing double. The other one goes for forever. And they've got like at least 3 plates on the bar plus band tension. Okay. And just barking it up doubles and doubles and doubles. And he says they get to somewhere in their early 20s and he sees that Chuck is like kind of starting to drag ass. And Dave says he had stopped squatting with as much speed as possible. He was just trying to stand up with the weight to save his energy. So he says he like sees Chuck dragging ass. He gets under the bar, blows up 2 reps to show him I've still got it. And then Chuck starts going. They wind up doing 45 to 50 sets of 2. Okay.
So it became like an endurance
And the whole
trial,
time,
basically.
Louis Simmons is telling Dave Tate, he's like, listen, you're going to lose. And the longer you commit to this, the more your training is going to be fucked up for the rest of this training cycle. Like, you're not, like, he would rather die than lose to you. And even an injured Chuck Vogelpool held off Dave Tate doing 45 to 50 plus doubles of 2 with 315 on his back, just over and over and over again. And Dave Tate said he realized that day the scariest people to face in competition are not the people who love to win, they're the people who hate to lose. And like Chuck, I'm sure he loved to win, but that is a man who hated to lose. And it's so difficult, Ian, to ask someone who thinks that way to compartmentalize that.
That's a great point.
That's what makes you great. Okay, it's so hard to turn it off, but it seems like the guys that get it under control tend to have the longest careers, right? Again, Chuck outsquats Vlad in the gym, and then he bombs out of the meet. Vlad sets an all-time world record, and according, Matt Wenning had this great point. He said, there's 2 types of lifters. There's guys like Chuck, and then there's guys like Vlad who are meat lifters.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's the great tragedy is, what if you got Chuck to perform at his best at the meet?
Oh, yeah.
Why, sadly we'll never see it, but because he wasn't that kind of guy. The competition seemed too stiff or too exciting in the gym. Whereas, what if there was money on the line on the platform? What if there was, somebody who's talking shit to him at the meet, and there was no limit in how many attempts you could take, or something like that, something to that effect, like a jiu-jitsu match with no time limit, like that kind of thing, where it's just force of will. And I think he probably had more force of will than most athletes of almost of any sport, from what I gather.
And what's great about Chuck, this is why I kind of fell in love with the dude even more over the course of my research for this, was Chuck couldn't powerlift anymore. So what did he do? Got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now he grapples. Yeah, now he grapples. He's way slimmed down. Still looks great. Still looks cut. Still looks jacked. Whatever. Because he's got to be down at least 50 some odd pounds or more from back in the day. But got into jiu-jitsu because he wanted that outlet. He's just such an aggressive dude. I mean, he was a corrections officer. All right, so we're talking about just a dude who's wired different, just very, very aggressive. But according to everyone at Westside Barbell, he was the first guy there to set up for the max effort lift. After the lift was over, he always spotted, loaded, and coached the next crew. okay, was like a real
Nice.
team player, but would also be the first motherfucker to throw you out if you started fucking up. Like if you were not pulling your weight, see you later, sayonara. He'd take your key in a heartbeat, you know. But fascinating dude. I wish that I could have trained at that old school version of Westside Barbell where they had like the red monolift and it's like 1,000 square feet
Yeah.
tops, and it's just Louis Simmons had spray painted the windows black so nobody could see in. It's just like pure, just complete madness. Just like 8 300-pound dudes in 1,000 square feet, and again, no one's backing down. You're all just kind of stuck training in there. Man, it must have been so much fun, dude. It must have been amazing.
Yeah.
And
The epitome of
and what's
hardcore.
really crazy, you brought this up, Ian, about the leaving it in the gym. Jim Wendler said this about that era of Westside. So there were two guys at Westside Barbell back in the day. George Halpert or Halpern, I forget, and Kenny Patterson. Okay. And they were by far the two best benchers in the whole world. Okay. Just obliterating world records at every single meet, competing pretty much only with each other because, again, Westside had a record board. Okay. And it was all about, I want to erase your fucking name off the board. Like that was
Yeah.
kind of like
Yeah.
the mentality. And Jim said that the most impressive feats of strength he'd ever seen in the gym, or some of the most, were just stuff that George Halpern did on a daily basis in training that you have to be in it to understand. Like, let's say they're doing a max effort lift, like a 2-board press against bands. Said he would see this guy blow weight up off of this that was unheard of. Like an orange band or purple, whatever type you're using, on each side for a bench. Okay. And he's throwing up like 4+
Crazy.
plates or whatever. And you're just like, how is this possible? Like that style of training, it's so tough to know how hard it is if you haven't trained with the bands or the chains yourself and understand it. And I remember
Yeah.
Jim saying like the stuff that this guy was capable of was absolutely unbelievable. This guy he set world records at 198. He used to do rolling tricep extensions with 110s.
Oh my God. Just makes me
Just
cringe.
just obliterating them
Incredible.
off the floor. But
That's
but
really,
when you
really
look at
strong.
his arms, it's just like this chunk of meat at the elbow. You know what I mean? That
Like a
just
ham
but
hock.
all at the
Yeah.
elbow. You know what I mean? Just blasting through bench presses over and over again.
Probably a tumor in there, or some kind of a cyst, some kind of inflammation that
you're injecting synthol, so Louis thinks you're a better bencher. Like, well, that tricep's really strong, man. I tell you what. But yeah, dude. I mean, what can we say? I miss training that way. I wish I could train that way again, but you need a crew. Moral of the story: you need a crew.
Yeah.
I've learned
Yeah.
over the past few weeks for sure. I could do endurance training by myself, no problem. For whatever reason, I don't need anyone there to get motivated. I don't need anyone there to execute.
Yeah.
I can do it, no problem. Okay. But I can't truly enjoy lifting without a good partner. And it makes me feel like a pussy, to admit that. Like, I've been doing it my whole life. Like, I should be able to enjoy it. But if I think of all of the guys that I emulated, my big coaches or lifters that I emulated, Dave Tate, Jim Wendler, Louis Simmons, Chuck Vogelpool, Justin Harris, every video of these guys is them with at least one other person who's similar strength and size.
Yeah.
Every single person.
You just someone to push
On top
you.
of that, you don't want to die.
I think you're an energy guy. You're an atmosphere guy. So you need, especially for max effort. Like you said, for endurance stuff, it's never max effort. You got to get the work done, and you're just cruising along, and you can kind of get into a mental zone. But to push yourself to lift that much weight, the crew.
On top of that, we said you don't want to die. And at a certain point, shit starts getting pretty fucking hairy. Like you're not going to be able, like, even, I'll close it with this. If I start doing heavy horizontal pressing again, I thought to myself, I'm going to do a lot of pin pressing.
Or you have partners now,
but
so but
even squatting, I might start doing Anderson squats. Like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I got a guy who's 5 inches shorter than me. He's not pulling the weight off me in the squat, but it's not happening.
No,
you got to start thinking in a sane way. But anyway, despite all of our difficulties, this was a great show. I would like to continue the tradition that you started, and I'll do this from now on. Next week's Physique of the Week, I don't want to know. I want you to shock me. I want you to make me guess. And I think if you had gotten the powerlifting numbers correct for Kazmaier, I would have guessed it. Because I was close. I knew his bench.
You did guess
660.
it.
I knew his.
You got it off the bench
I knew
alone.
his bench. I'm a Kazmaier freakazoid.
Yeah, when I chat GPT'd the stats, it didn't give me a breakdown of what was like in strongman, on a Smith machine with 5 girls on top of the carriage, so it didn't really do it justice. It wasn't like raw plate weight.
Either way, guy's a legend.
But, yeah.
So people,
right,
this has been a great show. We love you, Ian. Thank you so much for putting up with me. You're the only, you and my wife are the most patient people I know. If I'm being, it takes a lot of patience to be my friend. It takes a lot of patience. So next time you see Ian, shake his hand and be like, listen, the Iron Road podcast, it's literally all his doing. I'm just here to act like an idiot. All right, guys. Have a great one, friends.